Why was the gate taking so long to open? The question pressed quietly in her mind as sunlight spilled across the windshield, painting the world in gold and glass. Captain No, Colonel Sarah Martinez adjusted the cuff of her uniform, steady hands betraying the faint tremor of a morning too important to get wrong. 15 years of service and it had come to this. Command, responsibility, the weight of 3,000 soldiers, and a gate that wouldn't open. The hum of the engine was steady. Her driver, Sergeant Thompson, kept both hands at 10 and 2, eyes on the road, posture straight as a ruler. He didn't say a word, but she could feel the tension radiating from him, the kind that fills a car when something unspoken sits between duty and discretion. Up ahead, two young soldiers in pressed uniforms stood at the checkpoint, rifles slung, the bright morning catching the edge of their badges. One raised a hand to stop the vehicle, the other adjusted the barrier controls. Their movements were sharp, mechanical, practiced, but a little too rigid. New. Sarah smiled faintly. She remembered being that young once, when everything in the world depended on doing things exactly by the book. 15 years ago, she'd been the one standing at a gate like this, squinting against the sun, telling a nervous civilian they couldn't come in without clearance. Back then, she hadn't known that the hardest part of military life wasn't following rules, it was knowing when to bend them. But not today. Today she needed to see her soldiers as they were, unaware, unguarded, real. She had asked for discretion about her arrival. No red carpet, no salutes, no ceremony until the formal transfer later that morning. She wanted to walk through those gates and feel the pulse of her new command before anyone even said her name. The car slowed. Private Johnson, tall, barely 21, approached with purpose. His boots gleamed like mirrors, his jaw looked freshly shaved. His partner, Private Rodriguez, hung back near the barrier lever, eyes scanning the perimeter. They looked nervous but committed. Sarah leaned slightly toward the window, curiosity tugging at her calm. Would they notice her uniform jacket folded neatly over her briefcase? Would they sense the authority beneath her stillness? Or would they see only what they expected, a visitor, a woman, someone out of place? "Morning, sir," Johnson said crisply to Sergeant Thompson. "Identification, please." Thompson passed his card through the window without hesitation. His hand was steady, but his jaw tightened. Sarah knew the feeling, the strange mix of respect and guilt that comes from following orders that force you to keep secrets. Johnson checked the ID carefully. Everything about him screamed rulebook, every line memorized, every protocol sacred. Satisfied, he handed it back. "Thank you, Sergeant, and your passenger." Sarah met his eyes. They were earnest, a shade of blue too young to have seen much of the world yet. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out her ID, the old one, the one that still said Captain. Her new credentials lay sealed in an envelope upstairs, waiting for the ceremony that would make it official. Johnson took the card, studied it, then frowned almost imperceptibly. "Ma'am, this identification lists you as Captain Martinez. I don't have you on the access roster today. Could you tell me the purpose of your visit?" There it was, the moment of friction between authority and assumption. Sarah felt a quiet satisfaction rise beneath her calm exterior. They were doing their job, thorough, alert, exactly what she'd hoped to see. "I have business on the base this morning," she said simply, "nothing more." Her voice was even, not defensive, not demanding. She wanted to see how far they would go. Would they question her further? Would they call it in? Rodriguez shifted his stance, stepping a little closer. "Ma'am, do you have authorization paperwork or someone we can verify with?" Thompson shifted behind the wheel, uneasy. He'd been briefed, do not reveal her identity until after the gate. But watching two privates unknowingly challenge, a colonel felt like watching a train inch toward a cliff in slow motion. Sarah caught his glance in the rearview mirror. "It's fine," she said softly. "Let them handle it." Private Johnson hesitated, jaw tightening as he considered his options. He looked down at her ID again, then back at her. Ma'am, I understand you're military personnel, but without verification or orders, I can't allow access. Standing protocol. Sarah almost wanted to laugh, not at him, but at the perfection of the moment. She had written those very words into a security directive years ago. No exceptions. Rank does not override procedure without verification. And here it was, working flawlessly against her. Perhaps you should contact your duty officer, she suggested, still calm. Yes, ma'am, exactly what I was about to do. His tone was steady, but his throat bobbed slightly as he swallowed. He turned and walked briskly toward the small guard station, radio in hand. Rodriguez stayed by the vehicle, shoulders squared, eyes sweeping from the car to the horizon. For all his nervousness, his discipline was solid. The kind of soldier you could trust in the field, quiet, alert, ready. Sarah leaned back against the seat, watching the scene unfold like a slow-moving play she'd written years ago. Beyond the gate, the mountains framed the morning sky in pale blue lines. The air was sharp, clean, you could smell the metal of the fences, the dust on the wind. Fort Davidson, her base now, sat cradled in those mountains, one of the most secure installations in the region. And yet here she was, its soon-to-be commander, politely being told she couldn't come in. Thompson cleared his throat. "Colonel, ma'am, should I?" "Hold position, Sergeant," she said, eyes still on the guardhouse. "Let them finish what they started." Inside the small station, Johnson picked up the direct line. His posture stiffened as he waited for a response. "Base duty office, Staff Sergeant Williams speaking," came a voice through the receiver, crisp and tired. "Ma'am, this is Private Johnson at the main gate. I've got a Captain Martinez requesting entry. She's not on the access list, ID checks out, but authorization doesn't. Requesting guidance." A pause, keystrokes, then "Hold one, Private." Johnson waited, watching through the window as a civilian truck rumbled to a stop behind Sarah's car. A line was forming. Sweat gathered under his collar, but his tone stayed sharp when the voice returned. "Private, I'm not finding any Captain Martinez scheduled for today. Did she mention who she's here to see?" "Negative, ma'am. She says she has business on base but won't specify." Williams sighed softly on the other end. "All right, keep her there. I'll make some calls." Johnson hung up, exhaling quietly. He'd done his job, but the longer the car sat there, the heavier the air felt. Rodriguez looked over, silently asking what was next. Johnson shook his head. "Wait." Inside the vehicle, Sarah remained composed, though she could feel the weight of the minutes pressing forward. The line of cars behind them grew longer. A truck driver leaned on his horn before realizing who he was honking at, then went quiet again. Rodriguez stepped forward. "Ma'am, thank you for your patience. We're verifying authorization. Shouldn't take long." "You're doing well, Private," she said softly. "Security isn't meant to be convenient." He blinked, surprised by the warmth in her tone, and nodded. Back in the duty office, Williams was getting nowhere. No record, no appointments, no orders. She finally called the administrative office. "Corporal Davis, check for any special appointments today, Captain Martinez." A pause, then a change in the corporal's voice. Staff Sergeant, you might want to call the commander's office directly. I can't say more over the phone." Williams froze. That phrase, "can't say more," never meant good news. Moments later, she dialed the commander's line. "Master Sergeant Kelly, base commander's office." "Master Sergeant, this is Staff Sergeant Williams. I have someone at the gate, Captain Martinez, authorization unverified. Admin hinted it might be related to today's schedule." A pause long enough for her to hear papers stop shuffling. Then a slow, measured inhale. "Staff Sergeant," Kelly said quietly, "describe her." Female, mid-30s, professional demeanor, traveling in a transport vehicle driven by Sergeant Thompson. Silence. Then Staff Sergeant Williams, "Open that gate immediately and have Private Johnson report to my office in 30 minutes. Do not discuss this with anyone until you arrive." The line went dead. Williams sat back, heart thudding. Something big, too big, was happening. At the gate, Johnson's radio crackled. "Private Johnson, this is duty office. You are to grant immediate access to Captain Martinez's vehicle. Let them through now. Then report to the commander's office in 30 minutes. That's an order." Johnson blinked. "Copy that." He walked back toward the car, expression caught between confusion and dread. "Ma'am," he said, voice a touch softer now, "you're cleared to proceed. Apologies for the delay." Sarah gave a courteous nod, her eyes unreadable but kind. "No apologies needed, Private. You did exactly what you were trained to do." As the barrier lifted, Thompson eased the car forward. Rodriguez saluted instinctively as the vehicle passed, then lowered his hand, exchanging a worried glance with his partner. Johnson exhaled hard. "Raj, what the hell just happened?" Rodriguez's answer was quiet. "Whatever it was, we're going to find out, and I don't think we're going to like it." The car rolled deeper into the base, sunlight reflecting off the administrative building ahead, the same building where, in minutes, both young soldiers would learn who exactly they had stopped at the gate. Inside the car, Sarah looked out the window at the training grounds where troops ran drills, at the hangars shimmering in the light. Every face, every formation reminded her why she'd taken this post. To lead, but also to listen. Thompson broke the silence. "Colonel, you could have told them who you were." "I could have," she said, "but then I wouldn't know what kind of soldiers I was about to command." She turned her gaze back to the road. Integrity only means something when it costs you comfort. Thompson nodded, his respect deepening in the quiet. The base came alive around them, morning PT, the metallic echo of drills, the distant hum of helicopters lifting from the field. Fort Davidson wasn't just a post. It was a promise, and today, that promise had just revealed itself at the gate. Sarah sat a little straighter as they neared the headquarters. Ahead, Master Sergeant Kelly stood waiting by the entrance, already aware of everything that had unfolded. He raised a hand in crisp salute. "Colonel Martinez," he greeted with a knowing half-smile, "welcome to Fort Davidson. I trust the security at our gates met your expectations." Sarah returned the salute, eyes glinting with quiet humor. "Exceeded them, Master Sergeant, completely." And as she stepped out of the vehicle, the sunlight caught her insignia, glinting off the bars that had already taught her first lesson in command. Respect isn't demanded at a gate. It's earned one honest challenge at a time. She could feel every pair of eyes as she walked up the steps. The sound of her boots against the stone echoed like a drumbeat of change, quiet, steady, deliberate. Fort Davidson's main building towered above her, its walls lined with plaques honoring decades of command. Now her name was about to join them. "Colonel Martinez," Master Sergeant Kelly said again, holding the door open with respectful composure. His tone was formal, but there was something else beneath it, amusement, maybe even admiration. "I understand your arrival this morning was memorable." She smiled faintly. "Let's call it educational." The hallway smelled of coffee and polished brass. Staff moved briskly through corridors, carrying folders, nodding as she passed without yet realizing who she was. Her uniform bore no visible insignia of rank, not until the ceremony in less than an hour. For now, she was still anonymous. That anonymity felt like freedom. She glanced at the framed portraits on the wall, the commanders who had come before her. 12 years of Colonel Williams, hard leadership. Before him, men whose stern faces looked carved out of the very stone of the building. All of them had worn the same expression, proud, burdened, slightly distant. Her reflection in the glass looked different. Not distant, determined, a little tired but grounded. She remembered her father's words. Respect isn't what they give you. It's what they remember when you're not in the room. Kelly guided her down the hallway toward the commander's office. "Sir," he caught himself, Colonel Harrison is waiting for you. He's eager to hand things over before the ceremony begins." "Eager," Sarah repeated softly. "That's one word for it." When she entered, the scent of leather and old wood filled the room. Colonel James Harrison stood by the window, uniform pressed, posture sharp. He turned, his weathered face softening into a smile. "Sarah," he said warmly, extending his hand. "Congratulations, or should I say welcome to the chaos." She laughed quietly. "You make it sound like I didn't volunteer for it." "You did," he said, lowering his hand but not his tone. "That's what worries me." The two officers shared the kind of silence that only soldiers understand, full of respect, a little history, and the weight of unspoken stories. "I heard about your arrival," Harrison said, a flicker of humor behind his eyes. "Word travels faster than orders on this base. I think half the guardhouse still doesn't believe who they stopped this morning." Sarah folded her arms lightly. "Let's just say your security protocols work." "Apparently," he chuckled, "and I suppose they'll never forget that first encounter." "Neither will I," she said softly. She moved toward the large window, watching the early drills on the parade ground. Hundreds of soldiers moving in rhythm, the living pulse of Fort Davidson. She studied every detail of the base over the past month, the terrain, logistics, security. But no document had prepared her for this, the sound, the unity, the humanity. Harrison followed her gaze. "You're inheriting something strong, Sarah. These men and women believe in discipline, sometimes too much." She turned to him. "Too much discipline." He nodded slowly. "They follow orders to the letter, but sometimes they forget that orders aren't everything. Leadership, it requires balance." Sarah absorbed the words quietly. Balance, she'd spent her entire career walking that line, between being respected and being doubted, between compassion and command, between the voice that leads and the silence that endures. "Colonel," Kelly's voice came from the doorway, breaking the moment. "Private Johnson and Staff Sergeant Williams are here, as requested." Harrison's brows lifted. "You asked for them." Sarah nodded. "They deserve to know what really happened this morning before the ceremony. They probably think their careers are over." Harrison smiled knowingly. "You're about to make their week." Kelly disappeared for a moment and returned with the two soldiers. They stepped into the office with the nervous precision of people walking into a court-martial. Private Johnson's face was pale. Staff Sergeant Williams looked composed, but her hands were locked behind her back in a rigid, textbook stance. They came to attention and saluted. "Sir, ma'am." "At ease," Sarah said gently. "Please come in." Neither moved. Harrison hid a grin. "Relax, soldiers," he said. "You're not in trouble." Johnson blinked. "Sir, we were told to report directly. We weren't given details." "I imagine not," Sarah said, taking a slow step forward. "This morning must have felt confusing." "Yes, ma'am," Williams replied carefully. "We followed standard procedure. We contacted the duty officer, confirmed through admin, escalated properly." "I know," Sarah interrupted softly. "You followed protocol perfectly." They both looked surprised. Johnson stammered, "Ma'am, if there was any mistake, I—" "There wasn't," she said, voice calm, firm. "Not one." Harrison stepped beside her. "Private Johnson, Staff Sergeant Williams, this is Colonel Sarah Martinez. As of today's ceremony, she's your new base commander." The room froze. Johnson blinked once, twice. Then the color drained from his face completely. His throat clicked as he tried to speak, but no sound came out. Williams' lips parted, but she said nothing. Sarah almost felt bad for them, almost. Johnson finally managed a hoarse whisper. "Ma'am, we." "Breathe, Private," she said, smiling faintly. "You did your job, and you did it well." He looked at her like someone realizing he'd spent the morning arguing with the general of the army. Williams straightened. "Colonel, I take full responsibility for the delay. the verification system. Staff Sergeant, Sarah said, stepping closer, you did exactly what I would have done. You followed the chain, you protected the integrity of the gate, and you didn't compromise even under pressure. Williams blinked rapidly, trying to process the reversal. Sarah continued, her voice softer now. Do you know how rare that is? Soldiers who don't fold when the situation gets uncomfortable. Johnson swallowed. We thought we were about to get written up. Instead, Harrison said with a chuckle, you're about to get mentioned in a command address. Sarah watched their stunned expressions, then added quietly, Fort Davidson's strength doesn't come from who commands it. It comes from people who take their job seriously, even when no one's watching. You proved that this morning. A heavy pause followed, the kind that shifts the air in a room. Johnson finally let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Ma'am, permission to speak freely. Granted. When I asked for your ID, and you handed me that captain card, did you already know we'd stop you? Sarah smiled slightly. I suspected you might. I didn't expect you to handle it so perfectly. Rodriguez's name came to Johnson's mind, his partner still back at the gate, probably packing, waiting for word. Ma'am, my partner, Private Rodriguez. I know, Sarah said. You'll tell him later, together. I want you both at the ceremony. Williams frowned slightly. Colonel, if I may, will this incident be mentioned publicly? Sarah took a moment before answering. Eventually, yes, but not as a reprimand, as an example. Harrison nodded. This base has a tradition of stories that teach, the kind that get passed down through training. This one's going to be told for years. Johnson's posture loosened, his pulse began to steady. You're not angry. Sarah's voice softened again, not commander to soldier now, but soldier to soldier. Private, you did what every commander hopes their troops will do. You put the mission before convenience. That's integrity. Don't ever apologize for it. For the first time since entering the office, both soldiers allowed small, genuine smiles. Relief, pride, and disbelief mixed into something they'd remember for the rest of their careers. Kelly reappeared in the doorway. Colonel, the honor guard is ready. 10 minutes to step off. Sarah nodded, then looked back at Johnson and Williams. You're dismissed but not gone. You'll be part of this morning's ceremony. Stand tall. You earned it. As they left, Johnson whispered under his breath, Ma'am, thank you. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was not. When the door closed, Harrison exhaled. You know, Sarah, if you lead this base with that same calm, they'll follow you anywhere. She looked out the window again, soldiers assembling in formation, banners glinting in the morning sun. They won't follow me because I'm calm, she said quietly. They'll follow if I'm fair. Fair, Harrison repeated. That's harder than fearless. I know. The brass band began tuning outside, faint notes drifting through the open window. Sarah picked up the sealed envelope from the desk, her new identification, the one bearing her full rank and command authorization. She broke the seal, slid out the card, and held it for a long moment in her hand. Her reflection stared back at her from the plastic, the same eyes, the same quiet conviction, but something deeper behind them now. Leadership wasn't a medal, it was a mirror. She placed the new card in her pocket and turned toward the door. Ready? Harrison asked. As I'll ever be. They walked together through the corridor and out onto the front steps. The air was alive with motion, the rhythmic shuffle of boots, the crisp call of commands, the weight of history gathering in a single morning. Sarah paused at the top of the stairs, the sun cutting across her face. Below, the entire installation waited in formation, rows upon rows of soldiers, every uniform immaculate, every gaze forward. This was it, her beginning. Kelly stepped forward, voice booming across the parade ground. Attention on deck. A wave of movement rippled through the ranks, stillness sharpened into unity. Sarah's heart beat slow, steady. For a moment, she wasn't in uniform. She was that same young woman years ago, standing at a different gate, holding her breath, wondering if she'd ever earn her place in this world. Now she was here, not because someone let her in, but because she'd refused to give up. As she took her first step toward the formation, her mind whispered one thought. They didn't recognize me this morning. That's okay. The best kind of respect isn't given on sight, it's earned in time. She walked onto the parade ground with the quiet grace of someone who had nothing left to prove, only something left to give. The band struck the opening note. The flag rose, and the new commander of Fort Davidson began her command not with orders, but with gratitude. The sound of the band bled into the morning air, brass and percussion melting into sunlight. Flags shifted gently in the mountain breeze, their colors alive against the sky. It wasn't just a ceremony, it was a ritual, the way a base remembered its past before stepping into its future. Sarah stood behind the podium on the parade ground, her hands clasped lightly behind her back, posture firm but not rigid. The crisp edge of her new insignia caught the light, but she hadn't fastened it yet, not until the transfer was complete. She wanted the moment to belong first to the base, not to her. Colonel Harrison stood beside her, his voice steady as he read from the official order. In accordance with United States Army Regulation 620, effective this day, command of Fort Davidson is hereby transferred from Colonel James Harrison to Colonel Sarah Martinez. The final words carried across the formation like a wave. Then silence, the deep, respectful kind that feels heavier than sound. Sarah inhaled once deeply and stepped forward. For a heartbeat, she said nothing. The crowd waited. Every soldier knew that what came next would define the tone of her leadership. Some expected the traditional speech, efficiency, excellence, tradition. But she wasn't here to repeat anyone's script. She rested her hands on the podium and began softly. 15 years ago, I was standing where many of you stand now, wondering if anyone would notice how hard I was trying. Her voice carried through the speakers with the slow rhythm of truth. I didn't come from a military family of power or politics. I came from a small town, a father who taught me that respect is earned by actions, and a mother who believed that service doesn't end when the uniform comes off. She paused, letting the words breathe. Her gaze traveled across the formation, 1,000 faces, 1,000 stories behind each pair of eyes. This morning, she continued, before this ceremony, something happened at the front gate. A ripple of quiet curiosity moved through the ranks. Soldiers glanced at each other. Everyone had heard rumors that something unusual had taken place. No one knew what. Sarah's tone stayed calm, but a hint of amusement curved her voice. 2 soldiers, a private and a staff sergeant, followed protocol so precisely that they stopped me from entering the base. A low murmur spread through the formation. Harrison's lips twitched into a restrained smile beside her. They didn't know who I was, Sarah said. They only knew their duty. They verified identification, confirmed authorization, escalated the issue through proper channels, and never once broke composure. They did exactly what our training demands, even when it meant telling someone in uniform that she couldn't come in. The murmurs turned into quiet chuckles across the ranks. Even from a distance, she could see shoulders relaxing, the shared, human recognition that sometimes the best stories start with small mistakes that aren't mistakes at all. But here's the truth, she went on. They weren't wrong. They were perfect. Because real discipline isn't about convenience. It's about consistency, doing the right thing, especially when no one is watching and even when it's uncomfortable. Her tone deepened, softer, thoughtful, edged with emotion. I don't want soldiers who open gates because someone looks important. I want soldiers who guard them because everyone's safety matters equally. This base, your base, stays strong because of people like that. She turned slightly, looking toward the section of the formation where the gate detail stood. Private Johnson, Staff Sergeant Williams, front and center. Every head turned. Two soldiers detached from their unit, walking stiffly, their boots striking in perfect rhythm. Their faces were a mix of pride, disbelief, and the faint terror of being the center of attention in front of 3,000 peers. They halted in front of the podium and saluted. "Ma'am." Sarah stepped down from the stand, returning the salute, at ease. She stood close enough now that the crowd could see the faint smile in her eyes. "This morning," she said quietly to them, but loud enough for the ranks to hear, "you both reminded me why this uniform still matters. You reminded me that authority is only as strong as the integrity beneath it." She reached up, unpinned one of the new silver eagle insignia from her uniform, and held it out to Johnson, then another to Williams. "These," she said, "aren't for you to wear, they're for you to keep, so you'll always remember that even a colonel has to earn her place at the gate." The formation erupted, not in laughter, not in applause, but in something deeper, a collective exhale of respect. A few quiet cheers rose from the back before dying into reverent silence again. Johnson's voice trembled. "Ma'am, thank you." "Don't thank me," she said. "Thank yourself for doing your job." Williams swallowed hard, her voice steady. "Permission to speak, ma'am." "Granted." "Ma'am, when we stopped you, we were afraid we'd crossed a line." Sarah shook her head slowly. "You drew the right line, the one that keeps this place safe." They saluted again, and she returned it with precision. "Dismissed, soldiers, and keep guarding that gate like you did today, even if it's me again." They turned sharply, returning to formation as the faintest laughter rippled through the troops. But behind that laughter was pride, the kind that lingers. Sarah stepped back onto the podium. The sun had climbed higher, streaking the parade ground with light. She took in the faces before her, so many lives now under her command, each one trusting her, not because of rank, but because of the truth they'd just witnessed. "Fort Davidson," she said, voice lifting with quiet conviction. "Our strength is not measured in weapons or walls. It's measured in how we carry ourselves when no one is watching. I expect every one of you to hold this standard not for me, not for medals, but because it's the right thing to do." She paused again, feeling the wind shift slightly, fluttering the flags behind her. "This is not just a command, it's a trust, and I intend to earn it every single day." For a moment, she let the silence stretch. Then she stepped back from the microphone, giving the podium a final, respectful nod before returning to her place beside Harrison. He leaned slightly toward her and murmured, "You realize they're never going to forget that story, right?" She smiled. "Good, they shouldn't." The ceremony concluded with precision. The honor guard marched, the band played, and the crowd of soldiers dispersed into perfect formation, ready for the first day under their new commander. But the energy in the air had shifted. Something invisible had changed, a shared understanding that leadership here wasn't just about orders. It was about humanity. When the final salute was rendered and the formation dismissed, Sarah stepped down from the platform. Soldiers approached, offering quiet congratulations and salutes, their expressions more genuine than formal. She returned each one with gratitude. Private Johnson lingered at a respectful distance, the small insignia still clutched tightly in his hand. Williams stood beside him, her expression more composed but equally proud. "Ma'am," Johnson said as she approached, "I'll never forget this morning." "Good," she replied, "neither will I." "May I ask something, ma'am?" he added hesitantly. "Of course." "When you were sitting in that car, waiting, what were you thinking about us?" Sarah tilted her head slightly, considering the memory. The sunlight, the gate, the waiting silence. "I was thinking," she said, "that if every soldier at Fort Davidson has the courage to do what you did, to stand their ground respectfully, to follow protocol even under pressure, then I'd been given the privilege of commanding the right kind of people." Johnson's eyes glistened just enough for him to look away quickly. William stood taller beside him, her shoulders squared. "Carry on, soldiers," Sarah said softly, "and remind everyone else that duty still means something." As they walked off, she looked toward the gate in the far distance, a shimmer in the sunlight. The place where her command had truly begun, not with speeches or medals or orders, but with two young soldiers who'd said three words she'd never forget. "Ma'am, you're not allowed in." Those words had become her first lesson in humility as a commander, and maybe her best. Later, when the ceremony's noise faded and the field emptied, Sarah stayed behind. The wind carried faint echoes of the band, the rustle of flags, the heartbeat of the base settling into routine again. Harrison approached quietly, hands in his pockets. "You handled that perfectly," he said. "Maybe," she murmured, "or maybe they handled me perfectly." He smiled. "You'll fit here just fine." She looked out over the training fields. Soldiers were already running drills again. Somewhere out there, engines roared from the hangars. Somewhere else, laughter echoed from the barracks. Life went on, but with a new current running through it. A quiet pride, a shared story. "Do you know what I liked most about this morning?" she asked. "What's that?" They didn't hesitate, not for a second. They saw a possible risk and they acted. That's courage, not loud, not flashy, just steady. Harrison nodded. "The quiet kind of courage. The only kind that lasts." They stood together for a while, watching the base move, each lost in thought. For Harrison, it was the satisfaction of passing a command into capable hands. For Sarah, it was the heavy awareness that every salute from this moment on came with responsibility she could never take lightly. When he finally left, Sarah turned toward the building, alone again. The sun had begun to dip, shadows stretching across the field. The new colonel walked the length of the parade ground slowly, deliberately, each step a silent promise to lead with the same steadiness she had just witnessed from her soldiers. And in the stillness that followed, the moral of the day seemed to whisper through the wind. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The first week was quieter than she expected. No crises, no emergencies, just the steady hum of order, too steady, almost rehearsed. Colonel Sarah Martinez walked the length of the operations building each morning before sunrise, boots clicking softly against the linoleum floors. Soldiers saluted as she passed, precise and polite. Their eyes followed her respectfully, but distantly. They respected the rank, not her, not yet. That was normal. Respect, she knew, wasn't part of the transfer orders. It had to be earned one choice, one conversation, one unseen act at a time. Her first morning briefing began with silence. Staff officers gathered around the long oval table in the command conference room, laptops open, steaming mugs of coffee placed like small shields in front of them. The air smelled of fresh reports and restrained nerves. "Good morning," she said, voice calm but clear. "Let's begin." They went around the table one by one: logistics, training, intel, supply. Each report was efficient, robotic, rehearsed. No one looked up much. It felt like everyone was speaking to the screen, not to her. By the time the last officer finished, the room had gone flat. All facts, no pulse. She closed her notebook quietly. "That's all." A few nods. "All right," she said softly, standing. "Let me tell you what I heard." The officers shifted uncomfortably. "I heard data, numbers, reports. I didn't hear voices, I didn't hear concern, I didn't hear leadership." Silence. A captain near the end of the table straightened slightly. "Ma'am, I'm not criticizing," she interrupted gently. "I'm observing. Fort Davidson has a strong reputation because you know how to operate efficiently, but I want to know how you think, not just what you record." She leaned forward slightly, her tone steady but inviting. "Tell me one thing that worries you about your department, not in a report, in real words." The officers exchanged glances. No one moved. Sarah waited. She was used to waiting. She'd built her career on silence that made people look inward. Finally, Major Ruiz, head of logistics, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if you want honesty, our supply chain is a mess. Half our new recruits don't have proper cold weather gear yet. We've been patching inventory to make it look fine on paper." She nodded slowly. "Thank you, Major. That's what I needed to hear." Then she turned her gaze to the others. Anyone else brave enough to be that honest? Within minutes, the room began to thaw. Reports turned into admissions, numbers turned into stories. Someone mentioned morale issues in the barracks, another noted outdated vehicle equipment, another spoke of burnout in the training units. By the end of the hour, her officers were no longer hiding behind data. They were talking like people again. When they finally left the room, Kelly, her senior aide, remained behind. "You realize, ma'am, you just got more truth out of them in 45 minutes than the last commander did in a year." She looked out the window toward the mountains. "That's because I didn't ask for reports, Kelly. I asked for honesty." He nodded, almost smiling. "You're going to change the air around here, Colonel." "Air, not the problem," she said quietly. "It's oxygen. They've been holding their breath too long." That night, she stayed in her office long after the lights went out across the base. The glow from her desk lamp painted everything in gold and shadow. She opened the personnel roster, 3,000 names, each one a responsibility, each one a heartbeat she was now accountable for. She found herself tracing over the gate security section with her pen. Johnson, Rodriguez, Williams. Her first impression of the base wasn't a briefing. It was a moment, two young soldiers and one decision that defined everything about this place. Integrity, fear, courage. Her mind drifted back to the sound of the wind that morning at the gate, the hesitation before those words, "Ma'am, you're not allowed in." She smiled faintly. "You were right, Private," she murmured to herself. "I wasn't allowed in, not until I earned it." The knock on her door broke the quiet. "Come in." It was Captain Dawson, her training officer. "Ma'am, sorry for the late hour. I wanted to brief you about tomorrow's schedule." "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair opposite her. "And relax. You look like you've been awake since last Tuesday." He chuckled nervously, setting a folder on the desk. "I just didn't want to mess up the first impression." "You didn't," she said, taking the folder. "But tell me something. Off record, what's the real mood among the ranks?" He hesitated. "Honestly, ma'am, cautious. You're the first female commander Fort Davidson's ever had. Most of the troops respect that. Some don't know how to process it yet." Sarah didn't flinch. She lived that truth her entire career. "I don't need them to process it," she said. "I need them to serve well. Respect follows competence, not gender." Dawson nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am, but for what it's worth, word about the gate has spread. The troops are already talking about how you handled it. They're impressed." "Are they?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. The story's being told as a lesson that you respected the privates instead of reprimanding them. They're calling it the gate test." She smiled quietly, shaking her head. "That wasn't a test." "Maybe not to you, ma'am, but to them, it's already a legend." After Dawson left, Sarah closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. The base was silent now except for the distant hum of the night patrol. She could hear the faint rhythm of boots outside, two guards switching posts. Routine, unbroken, reliable. She let her thoughts wander. Command, she realized, wasn't about changing everything. It was about reminding people why they started. The next morning came early. The alarm buzzed at 4:30. By 500 she was already outside, walking the perimeter before the morning drills began. The air was cold, thin, sharp enough to bite through her gloves, but it woke her senses in the way only mountain mornings could. As she walked, soldiers ran past her, some recognized her and snapped salutes mid-jog. Others didn't, too focused on keeping pace. She preferred it that way. At the training field, she stopped near a group of recruits struggling through the obstacle course. Mud splashed, boots slipped, someone cursed under their breath. The instructor barked corrections, his voice sharp but fair. Sarah watched silently until the group reached the wall climb. One recruit, a young woman, tried twice and failed, her arms trembling with exhaustion. The instructor gave a small shake of his head. Sarah stepped forward. "What's your name, soldier?" The recruit turned, startled. "Private McKenna, ma'am." "Mind if I give it a try?" The instructor looked caught between confusion and terror. Colonel, ma'am, this is." "I know what it is," she said, rolling up her sleeves. A few recruits exchanged wide-eyed glances as she approached the wall. She placed her hands against the rough wood, crouched slightly, and with a quick burst of motion, climbed. Not perfect, not fast, but steady. When she reached the top, she looked down at the stunned faces below. "There's no regulation that says walls get shorter when you rank up," she said, breathless but smiling. Then she dropped back down, boots hitting the mud with a solid thud. "Private McKenna," she said, "your turn. You've got more strength than you think. Don't fight the wall, use it." The private took a breath, stepped forward, and tried again. This time she made it barely, but she made it. The small crowd broke into spontaneous applause. Sarah turned to the instructor. "Good course, keep them sharp." As she walked away, the recruits whispered behind her, a mix of disbelief and admiration. The word would spread, as it always did. But Sarah didn't care about that. She wasn't there to prove strength. She was there to show that leadership wasn't distance, it was presence. Later that afternoon, during her second briefing, Major Ruiz entered carrying an updated report. "Ma'am, logistics shortages are being addressed. Supply trucks from Denver are en route." "Good," she said. "Anything else?" He hesitated. "Permission to speak candidly, ma'am." "Always. The troops are starting to talk about you like you've been here for months, not days. You've earned their respect faster than anyone I've seen." Sarah looked at him, her expression unreadable but warm. "Respect is fragile, Major. It's like glass. Drop it once, it never shines the same." Ruiz nodded quietly. That evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, she stood once more by her office window. The base lights flickered on one by one, creating a constellation of order in the dark. She thought of her father again, his steady voice when she was young. "One day, Sarah, they'll salute your rank, but only your choices will make them mean it." Now she understood. Her first week hadn't been about control. It had been about connection, about proving that command wasn't a wall between her and her people, it was a bridge. And as she watched the final patrol march by, the night air whispering against the glass, she realized something profound. Leadership wasn't about being allowed in. It was about never locking the gate again. The alarm came at 02:17. A single clipped tone over the base intercom, the kind that slices clean through sleep. Then came the voice, "Security alert, Sector 4, all personnel stand by." Sarah was awake before the announcement ended. Her hand reached for the radio automatically, the movements muscle memorized from years of deployments. "Command, this is Martinez. Report." A moment of static, then the urgent tone of Staff Sergeant Williams came through. "Ma'am, perimeter sensors tripped near the East Supply Road. Possible breach, could be nothing, but we've got movement outside the wire." Sarah swung her legs off the bunk and grabbed her uniform jacket, already lacing her boots as she replied. "Seal the sector. No lights. Minimal chatter. I'm en route." The room's silence broke as her aide, Master Sergeant Kelly, appeared in the doorway, half-dressed, alert. "You heard." "Sector 4, she said. "You've got 2 minutes to wake ops. I'll take point." He didn't argue. He never did. Within minutes, the command center glowed alive, monitors flickering, officers sliding into chairs, radios crackling like restless electricity. The map on the main screen pulsed with red where the alert had triggered, the far eastern fence line, beyond the fuel depot, where tree lines blurred into mountain shadow. Sarah leaned over the console. Thermal. An analyst shook his head. Too much interference, ma'am. The cold front's messing with sensors. We can't confirm heat signatures. Movement pattern. Scattered could be wildlife, could be human. Sarah's jaw tightened. In this terrain you didn't assume could be, you confirmed it. Deploy the quick reaction team, she ordered. 2 fire teams. No vehicles, stay dark. I want real eyes on that fence. Kelly keyed the order in immediately. Outside, the base was already shifting, soldiers emerging from barracks, silent but sharp, the kind of wakefulness only adrenaline delivers. Through the window, Sarah saw flashlights cut briefly through the dark, then vanish. Helicopters stayed grounded, no point revealing their position for a maybe. In the tense quiet of the operations room, she could hear the faint hiss of the comms, like a breath being held. Team Alpha in position, came the voice over the radio minutes later. Visual on fence. Wait 1, we've got a section bent inward, about 2 meters. Kelly looked up sharply. That's no coyote, ma'am. Any signs of tools? Sarah asked. Negative. Looks like something or someone forced it manually. Her heartbeat slowed, not from calm but focus. Alpha, sweep the outer perimeter. Bravo, cover their flank. I'm coming to you. Kelly stepped forward. Ma'am, protocol says. I wrote half the protocols, Master Sergeant, she said quietly. Keep the line open. Outside, the night bit at her lungs. The mountain air was sharp, carrying the scent of diesel and pine. The floodlights stayed off per her orders. Darkness was safety now. A Humvee waited near the motor pool. She climbed in beside the driver, a young corporal whose eyes widened when he realized who joined him. Drive, she said simply. They moved fast but silent down the outer road, headlights off, guided only by the faint green glow of night vision goggles. The base loomed behind them like a sleeping giant, unaware of the heartbeat pounding through its veins. When they reached Sector 4, the sound of wind replaced everything, steady, low, unnerving. She stepped out, boots sinking into gravel. Ahead, faint outlines of soldiers crouched along the fence, weapons drawn but steady. Colonel on deck, someone whispered, the words rolling like a current through the team. Report, she said. Private Johnson turned, startled but composed. Ma'am, we found this section compromised. Fences bent inward, looks fresh. No footprints on our side. She crouched beside him, examining the wire with her flashlight shielded by her palm. The bend was clean, deliberate. Someone had tested the fence strength, then stopped. East side's too quiet, she murmured. If it was an animal, there'd be signs. If it was a person, they wanted us to find this. Williams' voice came through the radio again from command. Ma'am, Camera 6 picked up something flash movement near the ridge line 2 minutes ago. Sarah rose. How far? Half a click. Copy. Team Alpha were moving. They advanced uphill in tight formation, boots whispering over frost-covered earth. Every sound felt amplified, the crunch of gravel, the whisper of wind, the quiet click of safeties released. Then a crack, sharp, metal on stone. They froze. Hold position, Sarah ordered. Silence again, long enough for breath to cloud the air. Then another sound, this time closer. Left ridge, Johnson whispered. I've got something small, light source. Sarah lifted her binoculars. Through the darkness she caught a faint glint, metallic, handheld. Not a weapon, a camera. Recon drone operator, she murmured. Not ours. That single realization changed the air entirely. She lowered the binoculars and spoke quietly into her radio. Command, this is Martinez. We have unauthorized surveillance activity outside the perimeter. Likely observation attempt. No engagement yet. Lock down external comms and go to silent protocol. Now. Roger that, Williams answered, her voice clipped. Sarah turned to her team. They're testing us. Let them know we're awake. Within seconds, Alpha Team spread out in a low line, moving through brush like shadows. The faint whir of a small drone buzzed overhead, barely audible. "Ma'am," Johnson whispered, "orders to engage." She hesitated. That hesitation was everything. Too soon and they risked escalation. Too late and they risked compromise. She took a breath. No shots, just eyes. Let them see us looking back. She stepped into the open for a single moment, the silhouette of her figure outlined against the faint horizon. The drone froze mid-hover, as if surprised. Then, in the blink of a second, it retreated, rising higher, vanishing into cloud. "Gone." Sarah lowered her weapon. "Sector secure. Repair the fence. Log it as an intentional probe." Johnson nodded, relief mixing with adrenaline. "Ma'am, whoever that was, they knew exactly where to hit." "Exactly," she said, "which means they'll try again." By 0340, the base was back under full lockdown. Reports streamed in, systems secured, patrols doubled. No one went back to sleep. In the operations room, Sarah stood over the map again, the glow of screens washing her face pale green. Kelly approached quietly. "You handled that cleanly, ma'am. No panic, no casualties." She didn't respond right away. Her gaze lingered on Sector 4. "They weren't testing our fence," she said finally. "They were testing our reaction time." "And—" she exhaled slowly. "We passed barely." Kelly tilted his head. "You think it's connected to the new intel briefings from command?" "Maybe. Or maybe it's just the world reminding us that peace is never quiet for long." He studied her for a moment. "You going to get some sleep?" She looked at the clock. 0412. "Not tonight." After the shift change, Sarah went back outside alone. The air was colder now, the horizon painted gray. She walked the repaired section of fence, her boots crunching over frost. The soldiers on post saluted. "Morning, ma'am." "Morning," she replied softly. "Good work tonight." When they turned back to their posts, she stood for a moment longer, staring past the wire into the forest beyond. The trees were still, quiet, almost innocent in their silence. She'd seen this before, on foreign soil, on darker nights. The way tension lingered even after the danger passed. Command wasn't about paperwork or ceremonies. It was this, the long, sleepless hours where you wondered what else might be waiting in the dark. By dawn, the reports were already spreading. The colonel was out there herself, they said. No armor, no entourage, just boots on the ground. Somewhere between rumor and truth, respect began to turn into loyalty. Later that morning, during the debrief, Private Johnson stood before her again, eyes sharp but tired. "Ma'am, permission to speak freely." "Always private." "Last night, when you stepped into the open like that, were you trying to send a message?" Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Yes." "To them?" "No," her voice was quiet now. "To you, to everyone who stands behind the wire. We don't lead from safety, we lead from the line." He nodded, the understanding hitting him like a lesson that wouldn't fade. After he left, Sarah sat alone for a long while. The hum of the base returned to normal, the kind of normal that hides exhaustion under efficiency. She opened her journal, a habit she'd carried through every deployment. She wrote in neat, deliberate strokes. First breach attempt. No casualties, no mistakes, fear visible but controlled. Lesson reinforced. Leadership must be seen, not announced. She paused, pen hovering. Integrity under pressure is not instinct, it's training. And tonight they proved it works. She closed the notebook gently. That evening the base mess hall buzzed louder than usual. Soldiers laughed, traded stories, exaggerated the night's tension the way troops always did after a close call. But underneath the humor was pride. They'd seen their commander in the field, not behind glass, not in theory, but standing beside them in the dark. Private Rodriguez raised his cup toward the center table. To the colonel, the one who walks the wire. Laughter broke out, but it wasn't mockery, it was admiration disguised as ease. Across the hall, Sarah heard it and smiled faintly to herself. She didn't turn around. She didn't need to. The respect she'd hoped for that first day at the gate wasn't spoken in formal addresses anymore. It lived quietly now, in nods, in discipline, in the silence between orders. As she left the mess hall that night, she paused at the doorway, looking back at her soldiers, at the warmth, the laughter, the unity. They'd faced fear together and come out stronger. Outside, the sky was black again, but the stars burned bright above Fort Davidson. She tilted her head up toward them and thought, command isn't about standing above them. It's about standing with them, even when the darkness calls your name. And as she walked back to her quarters, the mountain wind whispering against her collar, one truth stayed with her, the same one that had followed her from the first gate to this night's fence line. Respect doesn't come from titles. It comes from footsteps in the mud. By the third day after the breach, something felt wrong. Not broken, just out of rhythm. Fort Davidson ran like clockwork, but Sarah had learned that even perfect clocks drift over time, and only those listening closely could hear the seconds start to slip. The reports from Sector 4 came in polished and proper. No irregularities, no further sensor disruptions, no visual contact. On paper, everything was fine, but in her gut, Sarah knew better. The incident hadn't been random. Someone had tested the fence deliberately, and someone inside the perimeter had known exactly when to watch. She stood in the operations center, arms crossed, staring at the map. The drone didn't just wander here, she said quietly. Whoever piloted it knew our blind angles. That kind of information doesn't come from guesswork. Major Ruiz, her logistics officer, frowned. Ma'am, our blueprints aren't public. Only senior staff have access. Exactly, she replied, which means someone gave it to them intentionally or not. A heavy silence filled the room. Captain Dawson finally spoke. You think we've got an insider? Sarah didn't answer. She learned long ago that in leadership, speculation spreads faster than truth. Instead, she said, I think we have a vulnerability, and vulnerabilities have names. That evening, she asked Kelly to bring her the security rotation logs, every shift, every personnel movement around the perimeter during the last 72 hours. He hesitated before setting the thick folder on her desk. That's a lot of data, Colonel. I've got a lot of time. He lingered in the doorway. Permission to speak, ma'am. Granted. You haven't slept properly in days. She didn't look up. Sleep is a privilege, Master Sergeant. Trust is a necessity. He gave a small nod, the kind that meant he understood but didn't agree, and quietly left her to the silence. Hours passed. The base lights dimmed. Outside, the wind pressed softly against the window panes. Sarah sifted through the logs, scanning pages of names, shift times, and radio frequencies. Her eyes blurred from the repetition, but something, a single line near the bottom of the second night's log, made her stop. Gate security rotation. Johnson Rodriguez relieved early at 1:30. Replacement, Private Klein, Corporal Nash. Relieved early. Sarah frowned. That wasn't protocol, not during heightened alert. She flipped to the duty officer's notes. No mention of authorization for the switch. No incident reported. She checked Klein's personnel record next, recently transferred from another post. Clean file, too clean. Her instincts prickled. At 2300, she called the duty office. Staff Sergeant Williams. Ma'am, Williams answered, instantly alert. Who authorized the gate rotation change 3 nights ago? Rotation change, ma'am. Yes, Johnson and Rodriguez relieved early. I'm looking at the log. There was a pause too long. Ma'am, I didn't authorize that change. Sarah's pulse slowed, the kind of calm that only came before something heavy dropped. Find out who did. Yes, ma'am. She ended the call and sat still for a moment, staring at the wall clock. The base ticked on as if nothing had changed, but her command had just shifted into something darker: suspicion. Leadership wasn't supposed to feel like this. You spend your life building trust, and then one line in a log makes you question all of it. She stood, put on her jacket, and stepped outside. The night was still, unusually so. The mountains loomed against the stars like a watchful silhouette. She made her way to the guard station at the main gate. Private Rodriguez stood at attention as she approached. "Ma'am," he greeted quickly, surprised. "At ease," she said. "Private 3 nights ago, who ordered you and Johnson off shift early." He blinked. "No one, ma'am. We were told we were being rotated by Corporal Nash, said it came from duty command." "You verified that?" He hesitated. "No, ma'am. The call sounded official and Nash is senior to me. We followed procedure." Sarah nodded. "And you left the gate unmanned for how long before the replacements arrived?" "Maybe 3 minutes, ma'am." 3 minutes, that was all it took. She turned back toward the road, her breath curling white in the air. "Thank you, Private, go on." When she got back to her office, Williams was waiting. "Ma'am, I checked comm logs. The order didn't come through official channels. Someone used an internal radio frequency, but it's been wiped from record." Sarah's jaw tightened. "So we've got a ghost in the system." Williams nodded grimly. "Could be an error, could be deliberate." "Errors don't erase themselves, Sergeant." The next morning, Sarah requested a quiet tech audit of all communications. No official announcement, no paper trail. She wanted to see who flinched first. While the tech team worked, she forced herself through the motions of daily command briefings, inspections, training oversight. On the surface, everything was fine, but she could feel eyes following her now, the subtle tension that ripples through a base when it senses unseen pressure. During lunch, she found herself walking past the same recruits she joined on the obstacle course days earlier. Private McKenna saluted smartly, smiling. "Permission to speak, ma'am." "Go ahead." "Word around the barracks says you haven't slept. That true?" Sarah smirked. "Word travels fast here." "Yes, ma'am, faster than mail." "Well, tell the mail it's got competition," she said, her voice softening. The girl grinned, then hesitated. "Ma'am, is it true we're under watch again? The night patrols doubled." Sarah's eyes lingered on the distant fence line. "It's true we're careful," she said. "And we stay careful because the world out there doesn't always announce itself before knocking." McKenna nodded solemnly. "Yes, ma'am." Sarah watched her rejoin her squad, young and unaware of how heavy command truly felt. By late afternoon, the results of the tech audit came in. Kelly entered quietly, a sealed report in his hand. "You'll want to see this, ma'am." She opened it. The first few pages were routine security pings, system logs. Then, highlighted in red, a single entry. User CN12. Temporary access granted. 1:16 hours. Unauthorized frequency override, external relay, untraceable origin. Sarah frowned. CN12. Kelly hesitated. "That's Corporal Nash, ma'am." The name landed like a dull echo in her chest. She closed the folder slowly. "Bring him in." Minutes later, the corporal stood before her in the briefing room, early 30s, confident posture, eyes too calm. "Corporal Nash," she said evenly, "3 nights ago you issued a gate rotation order that wasn't authorized. Explain." He blinked, caught off guard by her directness. "Ma'am, I was following a relay from duty command." "Whose voice did you hear?" I don't know. It sounded official. I didn't question it." "Convenient," she said softly. He stiffened. "Ma'am, are you accusing me of something?" "I'm asking you to remember." He hesitated, a fraction too long. Sarah studied him. "You transferred from Fort Brigham last month, correct?" "Yes, ma'am." That base reported a minor breach during your final week there. Classified details, but I've read the file. Looks familiar. His jaw twitched. That wasn't on me. Maybe not, she said, but I don't believe in coincidences. The silence stretched. She leaned forward, voice lowering. If you know something, Corporal, anything, now's the time to speak. Because if someone out there is trying to compromise my base and you help them, whether you meant to or not, I will find out. His gaze flickered just once, enough. Dismissed, she said. Report to holding until I decide next steps. He saluted stiffly, jaw set, and left. When the door closed, Kelly exhaled. You think he's involved? I think he's scared, Sarah said, and fear leaves trails. That night, she stood on the same ridge overlooking the east fence. The cold wind stung her cheeks, but she barely felt it. The base lights stretched below her like a constellation of order in an unpredictable world. This, she thought, was the part no one trains you for, the solitude, the doubt, the constant dance between trust and suspicion. A radio crackled quietly at her belt. It was Williams again. Ma'am, update on the comm audit. We found partial transmission data from that unauthorized signal. You might want to hear this. Patch it through. Static, then a distorted voice, male, low, deliberate. Test complete, she responded. Proceed as planned. Sarah froze. Kelly's voice came faintly through her earpiece. Ma'am, that was recorded the same night as the breach. She stared out into the darkness, her pulse steady but her thoughts racing. She responded. That meant her. This wasn't random, it was targeted. Someone wasn't testing Fort Davidson security. They were testing her. The realization landed like a cold weight in her chest. The drone, the fence, the unauthorized order, all of it had been orchestrated. She looked back at the base lights flickering below, each one representing a life that depended on her calm, her clarity, her strength. She whispered, not to anyone but herself, so that's how it's going to be. For the first time since taking command, fear brushed against the edge of her composure, not for herself, but for what it meant if someone was manipulating the systems from the inside. She turned from the ridge, eyes narrowing. The next move wouldn't be about defense, it would be about exposure. Whoever had decided to test Colonel Sarah Martinez was about to learn the one thing she'd built her entire career on. You can challenge her command, but you will never break her control. The next morning, Sarah didn't hold the usual briefing. Instead, she called in only 3 people, Kelly, Williams, and Major Ruiz. The door closed behind them with a soft, heavy thud. For a moment, the room was silent, except for the faint hum of the projector. On the screen behind her, the partial transmission replayed the same distorted voice, clipped and calm. Test complete, she responded. Proceed as planned. When it ended, no one spoke. Sarah turned, her expression unreadable. That was recorded 43 seconds after the breach alert. Ruiz exhaled slowly. Whoever said that knew exactly what we'd do. Kelly crossed his arms. They're inside, has to be. Sarah nodded. That's my assessment too, which means we handle this quietly. Williams shifted uneasily. Ma'am, with respect, that's an internal threat. Shouldn't we inform command? Not yet, Sarah said. Her voice carried the kind of calm that made people listen more closely. If I go up the chain too early, word spreads. The wrong ears could get it first. We do this in-house. Ruiz frowned. You're planning an internal investigation. I'm planning to protect my people, she replied. But we do it off record. No written orders, no electronic trace. We build a picture clean, quiet, unbreakable. She let her gaze settle on each of them in turn. This stays between us, agreed. They nodded. Even Kelly, who'd been with her long enough to know what that kind of decision meant: isolation, responsibility. The meeting ended. Within the hour, Sarah had split her 3 confidants into unspoken roles. Ruiz would quietly monitor logistics and requisitions, see who requested what, when, and why. Williams would keep her eyes on communications, silent listener, nothing more. And Kelly, as always, would be her shadow, the eyes that never left her back. The day unfolded like a normal one, at least on the surface. Training drills, supply checks, standard morale visits. But beneath the rhythm, tension pulsed like a hidden current. Sarah moved through the base with deliberate calm, greeting soldiers, making small talk, watching. Leadership, she knew, wasn't just command, it was performance. The right expression could hold an army together, even when everything beneath it was shaking. By late afternoon, she stopped at the mess hall. The noise was steady, forks against trays, low laughter, a radio humming faintly in the corner. As she passed between tables, she caught fragments of conversation, chatter about the breach, speculation, jokes. Nothing unusual, until she heard a voice she didn't recognize say quietly. She handled that breach too fast, like she knew it was coming. Sarah froze for a fraction of a second, then kept walking. But her pulse had already shifted, that slow, cold tightening that only truth could trigger. She turned her head just slightly and saw him, Corporal Nash, the same soldier under investigation, sitting 2 tables away, talking to another corporal. He caught her glance, froze mid-sentence, then straightened instantly. "Ma'am." "Corporal," she said softly, giving a small nod. "Enjoying dinner?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good," she replied, tone unreadable. "You'll need your strength." Then she turned and left, leaving the words to settle behind her like smoke. Back in her office, Kelly waited with a thin file. "Ma'am, Ruiz found something." He handed it over. Inside were supply records, all ordinary except one requisition from 2 weeks before the breach. Replacement signal amplifier field communication relay. Requested by CPL, Nash. Approved by Acting Logistics Officer, proxy signature. Sarah's brow furrowed. Proxy signature. Ruiz entered a moment later. "I checked that, ma'am. That order was logged under my name, except I never signed it." "So someone forged your clearance?" "Yes, ma'am. And whoever it was, they knew my authorization code." The implications hit hard. Someone had been planning this long before she arrived. Sarah closed the file. "All right, we tightened the circle even more. No new clearances, no open requests. If anything moves in or out of this base, I want to know before it breathes." Ruiz nodded, then paused. "Ma'am, permission to speak freely." "Go ahead." He looked uneasy. "You're doing all this yourself, no command backup, no formal team. That's risky." "I know," she said quietly, "but command will look for someone to blame before they look for the truth. If this turns political, the soldiers pay the price. I'm not letting that happen." Kelly's voice softened. "You can't do this alone, Colonel." She looked at him, then really looked. "I already am." That night the base seemed too quiet again. Wind brushed the walls. Somewhere a door slammed in the distance. She sat alone in her office, the faint hum of the heater the only sound. The lamp light made long shadows across the floor. For a long time, she stared at the same line in her notebook. "Someone is testing the limits of my command." Then, without thinking, she added another sentence beneath it. "And I am testing the limits of myself." The door creaked open. Williams stepped in. "Ma'am, we might have something." Sarah gestured for her to continue. I ran the communication relay patterns again. The unauthorized signal didn't just originate from inside the base, it was boosted. Boosted? Yes, ma'am. Someone used a portable amplifier near the north hangar, the same model Corporal Nash requested in that forged requisition. Sarah's stomach tightened. That hangar's restricted. Williams nodded. Exactly. But last night, around 200, the motion sensors inside were deactivated for 7 minutes. By who? We don't know yet. Sarah stood, her chair scraping quietly against the floor. Then we find out. She and Kelly made their way through the dark toward the north hangar. No lights, no escort, just two shadows moving through cold air and fog. When they reached the hangar, the massive doors loomed in silence. Kelly scanned the lock panel. Deactivation logged last night 0203, re-enabled at 0210. No camera feed, it was looped. Looped, Sarah repeated. That takes skill. She pushed the door open slowly. The smell hit her first, fuel, dust, and something faintly metallic. Inside, the hangar stretched wide and empty. Aircraft maintenance equipment stood in neat rows. Everything looked normal, too normal. She walked slowly between tool racks, flashlight beam tracing the floor. Then she saw it, a small metal case tucked behind a crate of spare parts. "Kelly," she said softly, "here." He crouched beside her as she opened it. Inside lay a signal amplifier, half disassembled, wires still warm from recent use. There was also a flash drive taped to the lid. Sarah pocketed it instantly. "We're done here." Back in her office, she locked the door and plugged the drive into her encrypted system. A single file appeared, no name, no extension. She opened it. Text filled the screen, fragmented but legible. Phase 2 initiated. Psychological readiness observed. Internal loyalty test effective. Awaiting confirmation for transfer of command transition. Martinez profile. Controlled, unbroken, unpredictable. Her breath caught. Psychological readiness. Command transition. This wasn't espionage. It was assessment. Someone, somewhere, was testing her for something bigger. She leaned back, heartbeat steady but sharp, mind racing. "They're not trying to sabotage the base," she murmured. "They're studying me." Kelly frowned. "Studying you for what?" She looked up at him, her eyes dark. "To see if I break, or if I belong somewhere they haven't told me about yet." The realization carried its own kind of dread. The breach, the fake orders, the forged requisition, all pieces of a larger pattern. Someone had been orchestrating a behavioral test inside her own command. A loyalty experiment. "Ma'am," Kelly said softly, "if this is coming from higher up." "Then we're walking a line between obedience and betrayal," she finished. "And if I push too far, I'll be the one they label unstable." Silence filled the room again. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, carrying the low hum of the generators. Finally she stood. "We say nothing, not yet. If this is a test, then we turn it around, we study them back." Kelly nodded, understanding. That night she didn't sleep again. She walked the perimeter alone, her boots crunching softly over gravel, the fence lights casting faint halos across the frost. Each step felt heavier than the last, but her thoughts were razor-sharp. She had spent her life following rules written by people who never stood where she stood. But now, those same people might be writing tests to measure how far she'd bend before she broke. Somewhere between the silence and the wind, she whispered to herself, "Let them watch, but I'll decide what they see." And as she turned back toward the heart of the base, her silhouette cutting through the thin mountain fog, she felt something shift inside her, not fear, not even anger. Resolve. They wanted to know if she could handle pressure. They were about to find out what pressure feared in return. For 3 days, Colonel Sarah Martinez lived inside silence. No new alerts, no unexplained orders, no movement beyond the wire. But silence wasn't peace anymore, it was camouflage. The message from the flash drive kept replaying in her mind. Phase 2 initiated. Psychological readiness observed. Those words weren't written by enemies. They were written by evaluators. Someone inside her own chain of command had turned her life, and her soldiers, into an experiment. She didn't show it. She didn't let it leak into her voice, her orders, her face. Outwardly, Fort Davidson ran smoother than ever. The troops respected her more with each passing day. The fence had been repaired, drills ran perfectly, morale was high. But beneath that precision was fury. Not loud, not reckless, the kind of fury that builds quietly in people who know they've been underestimated. By the fourth night, Sarah decided she'd waited long enough. She met Kelly in the operations center, the place that had once felt like a heartbeat but now felt like a theater. "Everything ready?" she asked. He nodded. "Williams planted the trace protocol. If anyone tries to access the system remotely again, we'll see where it bounces from." "And Ruiz?" "He's reviewing supply logs. He thinks the amplifier parts came from an experimental communications program, one tied directly to Central Command." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Then we're not chasing ghosts anymore, we're chasing authorization." At 100 the signal came again, subtle, hidden. A short, encrypted burst through their communications grid, same frequency, same pattern. Kelly's console blinked. "Trace engaged, stand by." They waited, every second stretching thin. Then a location. Not foreign, not even outside the base. The signal was originating from the command annex, the small, secure building 300 meters from her office. The one used for high-level coordination with Central Command. Sarah's heartbeat slowed. "Kelly, lock the annex doors remotely. No one leaves until I'm there." He hesitated. "Ma'am, if this involves higher authority." "I'll handle the authority," she said. Minutes later, she stepped into the freezing air. The walk to the annex felt longer than it was, not from distance, but from what waited at the end. When she entered, two staff officers looked up, startled. The room glowed pale under fluorescent light. "Colonel," one began, but she cut him off. "Who authorized tonight's uplink transmission?" They exchanged confused glances. "Ma'am, we didn't." "Don't lie to me," she said softly. "The signal originated from this terminal." One of them, Captain Vance, looked nervous now. "Ma'am, we just followed protocol. It was a scheduled data sync with Central Command." "Scheduled?" she asked. "Show me the order." He hesitated, then opened the system log. There it was, an encrypted directive stamped with Central Command clearance but without a signature. Just one line of metadata, program, Vigil 7. Sarah leaned closer. "What is Vigil 7? The second officer swallowed. "Ma'am, I don't know, it's above our clearance. We just run the sync when told." She straightened. "Not tonight, you don't." With a few keystrokes, she terminated the transmission midstream. The console beeped a warning, red flashing across the screen. Within seconds, her radio came alive. "Colonel Martinez, this is Command Control. We noticed your termination of the scheduled data relay. Explain immediately." The voice was clipped, distant and cold. Sarah pressed the transmit button slowly. "With respect, sir, the relay was unauthorized under current security conditions. I need clarity on program Vigil 7. Silence. "Then, you don't have clearance for that program, Colonel." She smiled faintly to herself. "That's the thing about command, sir. Clearance follows accountability." "Colonel, stand down." But she'd already disconnected. She turned to the officers. "If anyone reinitiates that link, I'll have them confined. Understood?" They nodded, shaken. As she left the annex, Kelly met her halfway, breath visible in the cold. "That was them, wasn't it? The people behind the test?" Sarah didn't answer. She looked toward the horizon, the faint gray hint of dawn bleeding into the sky. "They just confirmed what I needed to know," she said. "This wasn't a breach. It was surveillance, not against the base, against me." He frowned. "Why you?" "Because I don't fit their mold. Because they wanted to see if a woman in command would flinch under pressure." Kelly's jaw tightened. "They built an entire test just to measure that." She looked at him, eyes steady. "Men have built wars for less." That morning, Sarah filed an encrypted report directly to the Inspector General's office, bypassing the entire chain of command. No emotion, no accusation. Just data, timestamps, system logs, and evidence of unauthorized psychological testing under her command. Then she waited. For 2 days, no response. Just the regular hum of military life pretending everything was fine. Until the black SUV arrived. It rolled through the gate at midday, tinted windows, government plates. Soldiers stood straighter as it passed. Kelly spotted it first. That's Central Command. Sarah didn't move. She just closed the file she'd been reading and said quietly, "Let's greet our guests." 3 officers stepped out. The man in front, Brigadier General Lane, was someone she recognized from briefings years ago, a bureaucrat in uniform. "Colonel Martinez," he said, tone coolly polite, "you've caused quite a stir." "Did I?" she replied calmly. "I thought I was just doing my job." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Your report reached higher desks than you realize. Program Vigil 7 is classified. You weren't supposed to know about it." "That's the thing, General," she said, stepping closer. "When it interferes with my soldiers' safety, I'm supposed to know everything." Lane's expression hardened. The program was designed to evaluate command resilience under controlled stress. You were selected for your reputation, exceptional performance, emotional restraint. We needed to observe it under pressure. "You used my people as pawns," she said quietly. "We ensured no harm came to anyone." "Except trust," she replied. "You turned integrity into an experiment." He sighed. "You're taking this personally, Colonel." She met his gaze without blinking. "Leadership is personal, sir. It's not a lab study." For a long moment, no one spoke. The air between them was cold, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, Lane straightened. "Central Command will conduct a formal debrief. You'll be reassigned pending review." Kelly took a step forward, but Sarah lifted a hand, a silent command to hold. "I understand," she said evenly. Lane gave a curt nod and turned to leave, but before he reached the door, her voice stopped him. "Tell your evaluators something for me, General." He paused. "Tell them they didn't observe resilience. They provoked it, and the difference is everything." He said nothing, just left. After they were gone, Kelly stood beside her in the quiet. "They're pulling you out, aren't they?" "Yes," she said softly, "but not because I failed." He nodded. "No, ma'am, because you didn't." That night she packed her office alone. No ceremony, no farewell. Just the quiet shuffle of folders, the faint sound of boots against tile. Before leaving, she walked one last time to the gate. The same gate where it had all started. Private Johnson and Rodriguez were on post again. They straightened instantly when they saw her. "Ma'am, we heard about the reassignment." She smiled faintly. "Rumors travel faster than orders, don't they?" They looked uneasy. "You're leaving us, ma'am." "For now," she said. "But this base doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the people who stand watch when no one's looking." They nodded, emotion in their faces. Johnson hesitated, then said quietly, "Permission to say something, ma'am." "Go ahead." "When you first came through that gate, we thought we were stopping someone. Turns out we were meeting the person who showed us what leadership actually looks like." Sarah's throat tightened, but her voice stayed steady. "Thank you, Private. That means more than you know." She looked past them at the open road, the mountains painted gold by the rising sun. For the first time in weeks, she felt calm, not because everything was resolved, but because she'd found something stronger than answers. Dignity. You couldn't test that. You couldn't measure it in reports or charts or reaction times. It lived quietly, like courage, invisible until you needed it most. Kelly approached with her bag, ready. She turned one last time to the soldiers at the gate. "Take care of the place, and remember, authority isn't power, integrity is." They saluted sharply. As she walked toward the waiting vehicle, the mountain wind caught the edge of her uniform, lifting it slightly, like a silent salute from the land itself. She didn't look back. Some places stay with you even when you leave them behind. As the SUV rolled down the long road away from Fort Davidson, Sarah watched the base grow smaller in the rearview mirror. The lights, the fences, the towers, all fading into distance. But inside, a strange peace settled. Maybe command wasn't about how long you held the post. Maybe it was about what you left behind: honesty, steadiness, faith. The voiceover would have softened here, quiet music rising beneath the words. They tested her patience, her resolve, her command. But in the end, she proved something no file could capture: that leadership isn't granted, and it isn't measured. It's chosen moment by moment, when no one's watching. And as dawn stretched across the mountains, a final thought lingered, quiet, timeless, unshaken. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.